course, the majority of the irrigated acres are pivot irrigated. We had two furrow irrigated sites. We had two furrow irrigated sites. One of those sites was transitioned to drip for 2011. So that leaves us with one furrow irrigated site. And this was something that the producers were very adamant about. Why would you want to include furrow irrigation in an irrigation demonstration project? They wanted to be able to show where we've been and where we're at now, how much water were we using with furrow irrigation versus the new technology that we've got with subsurface drip and our pivot systems. Each year since the beginning of the project in 2005, we have seen our subsurface drip acres increase in the sites in the project. We also have two dry land sites associated with the project. Well, some of the information that we're gathering, all of our irrigated sites are equipped with net irrigate, and the information that we're gathering from net irrigate, regardless of the number of irrigation wells that are supplying water to a particular system, we monitor how much total water is going through that system. We also have telemetry on all the pivots. So if we have multi-crops under a single pivot, we're able to dedicate the water that was used from one crop to another one. The High Plains Underground Water District are very involved with us, and their personnel have installed permanent neutron probe access sites in each field in the project. So at the beginning of the growing season, as close to planting as possible, they go in and take readings of what our beginning soil moisture inventory is. And then as close to harvest as possible, they come back and take an ending soil moisture reading. Excuse me. The objective here is to be able to calculate actual crop water use, because we know how much water is going through the system and been applied to the specific crops. We have automated tip and rain gauge buckets and manual rain gauges that the water district reads for us. So we're able to know how much water was applied, how much water we received from rainfall during that growing season. We are able then to calculate from prior to planting, from winter moisture received, how much moisture is actually available to that crop at the beginning of the growing season. We record all that rainfall, but only what is our beginning soil moisture balance is what we're using. So we can really calculate what crop water use is. Starting about 3 years ago, when the smart crop sensors first were released, the project bought some of those sensors, and what we've done is we've made those available to growers. We move those from site to site each year to try to let all the growers that are involved in the project have access to that information. You heard Dr. David Sloan this morning. In 2010, we started using some AquaSpice sensors. I'll talk about our implementation phase in just a little bit, but David worked with us really close, and we were able to put several of those sensors out in 2010. Then the producers really do a great job for us of actually keeping very accurate records of all of the inputs: planting dates, varieties, seeding rates, all of the other inputs as it pertains to fertility, tillage, herbicides, insecticides, and yield. So that information then is initially gathered by Jeff Pate and Jay Yates with the Farm Assistance Program there in Lubbock. And then we have two economists at Tech, Dr. Justin Weinheimer and Phil Johnson. We take that information and develop a budget for each producer for each crop that he's growing. And one of the things we try to do is not just look at profitability of the specific crops, but what is the net return per total inch of water available to that crop, both rainfall and irrigation, and what's the net return per acre inch of water applied. Again, to try to start to create a value for what that water is really worth versus just the cost of pumping that water and delivering it to a crop. So the economic component is really important. The other thing that we do from the economic standpoint is, and of course the last 3 years, counting what's going on right now, we've seen some real fluctuation in fertilizer cost, for example. So we can see a big difference in profitability when we use the grower's actual numbers on when he purchased his fertilizer inputs and maybe a shift in what he's using. So what we do is when we gather this information from the growers, we come up with an average cost, let's say for 32 or 1034O or whatever our fertilizer input might be. So we take away that purchasing time frame and standardize that across all the sites. We keep the real numbers, but we as far as profitability goes, it doesn't vary based on a buying opportunity or even a selling opportunity from a contract price. We standardize our commodity prices from one site to another. I mentioned our producers involved in the project. We do not in any way dictate to a grower what we think he should grow, or the varieties or anything else. So the producers have total flexibility in the cropping systems that they design. And of course, it's pretty well all market driven. A comment I've made several times, and I really believe this, that I don't work with any producers that are not very conscious of water conservation and the situation we're in as far as the declining aquifer. But first and foremost, each operator has to be concerned about how he's going to pay his operating loan back at the end of the year. And so the water issues basically become secondary behind survival from an economic standpoint. And to kind of show this, we can look at the change in cropping systems from 2005 through 2009. The big change was in 2005, 27% of our sites were monoculture cotton. In 2009, that dropped to 15%. In 2010, we're going to see a slight increase in cotton acres, and I don't have a clue what's going to happen in 2011 with all the commodity prices like they are. But this indicates that these guys are reacting where they have the ability and the water to look at different cropping systems, or reacting to what the market's telling them that they think they should do. Of course, our multi-cropping system represented 50% in 2005. We're looking at 57% in 2009. And what we're seeing as far as multi-cropping, that's usually cotton and corn, or in a lighter water site. We've seen some guys that were 100% cotton on 120 acres, and because of a decline in the amount of water that's available, they're looking at a cotton wheat rotation. The other thing that we're going to see in 2011, I know, is a decrease in our livestock sites. A lot of these perennial grass sites are being plowed up and they're going to cotton in 2011. So that's going to have a major impact on our shift in acres. Okay, this represents the different systems that we've got in the project and the average water applied versus gross margin of those particular systems. If you'll notice, over the first 5 years of the project on cotton, our average irrigation applied was somewhat less than 12 inches. And our gross margin, the green bar, in the right-hand scale, we were up just about $300 in gross margin per acre. For a time frame when the sunflower contract prices were pretty good, we had significant acres of sunflowers, especially in 2008. We're down just above 6 inches on 8 inches irrigation applied, and we're at about $200 in gross margin. Multi-crop, again, we normally have some grains in our multi-crop mix. Our amount of irrigation applied jumped up to about 13 inches. gross margin stayed pretty similar to what cotton was. Integrated crop livestock systems, irrigation applied about 11 inches with about $250 in gross margin. One thing that I've observed in the producers that they have included livestock into their operation, early on in the project we had a higher number of producers that were running stocker cattle, but with the fluctuations in feed cost, we've seen more of the producers shift to cow-calf operations away from stocker operations. And when they have planted improved grasses with some irrigation, they have really looked at the portion of a circle that was the most marginal as far as soil was concerned. And they looked at that perennial crop of grass. It would get a drink of water when a row crop didn't need it. So they were using it, having it there growing. If we did get rainfall, then they already had a crop in the ground growing that could utilize that rainfall event. And we move on over to corn, and of course what we see on corn is we're using the largest amount of water average over that 5-year period, but still around 16 inches average, with a gross margin of almost $600 per acre. I can't tell you what's magical about what we did here, but we picked some numbers. We wanted to know which systems that had grossed $300 per acre or more with 15 inches or less water. And really what we were looking for here was there a specific system that dominated that criteria. And what we found was that there wasn't. There was pretty well a representation of each one of the systems that had been able to reach that goal. So what that tells us is that in most situations it's not always the crops you pick, but it's the management driving from the producers that's driving the profitability of those systems. During the first 5 years of the project, we've had 50% of the producers that actually hit that magical box that we're talking about. But as far as systems go, only 22% of the systems were actually able to accomplish that. We took it a step further and we looked at 10 inches or less of water and $200 per acre of gross margin. What fell out of that box was our corn sites and some of our multi-crop sites that included corn.